Zara Blackwell's fingers traced the worn black leather bracelet around her wrist as she stared at the empty classroom before her. Most people saw jewelry when they looked at it, but she felt 15 years of disciplined fury wrapped around her pulse point. The morning light filtered through Lincoln High School's windows, casting long shadows across desks that would soon hold 30 teenagers who had no idea their new English literature teacher could break bones with the same hands that graded their essays. Zara took a deep breath, the familiar ritual grounding her as it had every morning for the past 3 weeks since she'd started teaching here. Touch the bracelet. Remember Master Kim's voice. Remember why she'd walked away from everything she'd trained for. Violence is the last resort. Wisdom is the first weapon, she whispered, repeating the words that had guided her through countless sparring sessions, through the pain of her career-ending shoulder injury, through the decision to trade fighting rings for classroom rings. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. At 26, Zara was younger than some of the senior students' older siblings, a fact that hadn't gone unnoticed by Lincoln High's power structure. This wasn't some inner-city school where teachers needed combat training to survive. This was suburban Texas, where the biggest problems were supposed to be homework complaints and dress code violations. The kind of place where a young teacher with an education degree and a passion for literature should have been welcomed with open arms. Should have been. Zara pulled her shoulder-length brown hair into a neat ponytail, wincing slightly as her left shoulder protested the movement. 2 years since the injury that ended her semi-professional Krav Maga career, and her body still reminded her daily of what she'd lost. Or maybe what she'd been redirected toward. Master Kim had always said, everything happened for a reason, even when you couldn't see it yet. The classroom door burst open with the kind of aggressive energy that made Zara's trained instincts prickle. 3 boys strutted in, moving with the casual arrogance that came from knowing the rules didn't apply to you. Jackson Blackwood led the pack, all 6 feet 3 inches of quarterback confidence wrapped in a Letterman jacket that probably cost more than Zara's monthly rent. "Morning, Miss Blackwell," Jackson drawled, deliberately emphasizing the miss as he dropped into a desk in the back row. His 2 companions, Mason Reynolds and Tyler Chen, flanked him like bodyguards. "Ready for another fun day of pretending we care about dead poets?" Zara had been teaching long enough now to recognize the test. Every word was calculated, every gesture designed to establish dominance. She'd seen it before in the dojo when new students tried to intimidate their way to the top of the hierarchy. The difference was, in the dojo, Master Kim would have put them on the mat in about 30 seconds. Here, she had to use different weapons. "Good morning, Jackson," she replied evenly, not rising to the bait. "I trust you've finished the reading on Langston Hughes we discussed yesterday." The laugh that escaped Jackson's lips was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, I read it. All right, some angry black guy writing about dreams. Real relevant to my life." The casual racism hit the classroom like a physical blow. Other students, who had been filtering in during the exchange, suddenly found their phones fascinating. Zara felt her jaw clench, her hand unconsciously moving toward the bracelet again. "Langston Hughes wrote about the human experience of aspiration and frustration," she said carefully, "themes that transcend race and speak to anyone who's ever wanted something better for themselves. Yeah, well, some of us don't need to dream, Tyler chimed in. Some of us are already living it. Mason snorted. Easy to talk about dreams when you're sitting pretty with a football scholarship already locked up. And there it was. The casual mention of Jackson's untouchable status. Delivered like a threat wrapped in conversation. Zara had heard whispers about the quarterback's special treatment. How Coach Brennan had made it clear that certain students were essential to the school's reputation. Essential enough to be above consequences. The rest of the students had arrived now, including Luna Vasquez, who slipped into a front-row seat with the kind of careful invisibility that came from practice. Zara had noticed Luna from her first day. The quiet Latina girl who turned in flawless assignments and participated thoughtfully in discussions when she thought no one was watching. The kind of student teachers dreamed of having. The kind of student who, apparently, made others uncomfortable. All right, everyone, let's begin, Zara announced, moving to the front of the classroom. Luna, would you mind sharing your thoughts on Hughes's use of deferred dreams as a metaphor? Luna's face lit up as she opened her notebook, pages covered in neat handwriting and careful annotations. I think Hughes is asking what happens to hope when society systematically denies opportunity. The dreams don't disappear. They transform into something else entirely. Excellent analysis. Can you elaborate on that transformation? Well, he gives us different possibilities. Dreams can dry up. They can fester. They can stink like rotten meat. Luna's voice grew stronger as she spoke, her passion for the subject overcoming her natural shyness. But the last option he gives us is that maybe they explode. That's the most dangerous possibility because it suggests that denial and oppression create pressure that eventually has to release. It was a brilliant interpretation, delivered with the kind of intellectual clarity that would have made any teacher proud. Zara was about to respond when Jackson's voice cut through the moment like a knife. Sounds like someone's been watching too much revolutionary bullshit on TikTok. The classroom went dead silent. Luna's face flushed red, her confidence evaporating as quickly as it had appeared. She looked down at her desk, suddenly small again. Jackson, Zara said, her voice carrying a warning edge. That's inappropriate. What I'm just saying, maybe we should focus on real literature instead of angry propaganda. I mean, this is America. Anyone can make it if they work hard enough. The ignorance was breathtaking, but it was the casual cruelty that made Zara's blood pressure spike. She could see Luna shrinking into herself, could practically feel the girl's intellectual confidence crumbling under the weight of casual dismissal. Literature reflects the full spectrum of human experience, Zara replied, fighting to keep her voice level. That includes voices that challenge comfortable assumptions. Comfortable for who? Mason added with a smirk. I'm plenty comfortable. That's exactly the point, Luna said quietly, surprising everyone, including herself. The poem asks, what happens when other people's comfort comes at the cost of your dreams? For a moment, Zara felt a surge of pride. Luna was finding her voice, standing up for her perspective despite the hostile environment. But Jackson's reaction killed that hope immediately. Oh, here we go, he said, rolling his eyes dramatically. The victim complex comes out, let me guess. Everything is someone else's fault. Right? Some people just need to accept that not everyone gets to be special. The words hit Luna like a physical blow. Zara watched the girl's shoulders slump, watched her retreat back into protective silence. And something inside Zara's chest caught fire. She'd seen this before. Not in classrooms, but in training sessions with kids who'd been bullied. Kids who'd lost their sense of personal power. Master Kim had taught her that there were different kinds of violence, the obvious kind that left bruises, and the subtle kind that left scars on people's souls. "Jackson," Zara said, her voice dropping to a register that her old sparring partners would have recognized as dangerous. "I need to see you after class." "Can't. Got football practice." "Then you'll be late to football practice." The challenge hung in the air between them. Jackson's eyes narrowed, recognizing that something had shifted in the dynamic, for the first time since he'd walked into her classroom. Zara wasn't backing down. "Fine," he said finally. "But Coach Brennan doesn't like it when his players are late." The implicit threat was clear. Coach Brennan ran this school's real power structure, and everyone knew it. Cross the football program, and you'd find yourself on the outside looking in. Zara smiled, and it wasn't a particularly warm expression. "I'm sure Coach Brennan understands the importance of education." The rest of the class period passed in tense silence. Luna didn't participate again, and Zara could feel the girl's hurt radiating across the room like heat from a fever. When the bell rang, students filed out quickly, eager to escape the charged atmosphere, all except Jackson, who remained sprawled in his chair with deliberate insolence. "You wanted to talk," he said when they were alone. Zara closed the classroom door and turned to face him. For a moment, she let her teacher mask slip just enough to show him something else underneath. Something that had spent 15 years learning how to read threats and respond accordingly. "Let me be very clear," she said, moving closer to his desk. "What happened to Luna today will not happen again in my classroom." Jackson laughed, but there was less confidence in it now. "What? You're going to protect her? That's cute. But here's the thing, Miss Blackwell. This isn't your world. This is mine." "Is it?" Zara asked softly. "Because, from where I'm standing, you look like a scared little boy playing dress-up in his daddy's clothes." The color drained from Jackson's face. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough. I know you target students who threaten your sense of intellectual superiority. I know you hide behind your athletic status when people call you on your behavior. And I know you've been getting away with it because adults are too intimidated by your connections to hold you accountable." Jackson stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. At his full height, he towered over Zara by nearly a foot. In the confined space of the classroom, his physical presence was genuinely intimidating. "You think you're tough because you're young and you've got some college degrees. This school protects its investments, lady, and I'm $1 million investment walking around in a 17-year-old body. You're just some nobody teacher who'll be gone next year when you realize you can't hack it." Zara didn't step back. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with the kind of clinical assessment she'd learned in behavioral psychology classes. "You know what I think? Jackson, I think you're terrified that someone like Luna might actually be smarter than you. And in a fair fight, that scares you to death. Fair fight." Jackson stepped closer, close enough that Zara could smell his cologne and see the barely controlled anger in his eyes. "There are no fair fights. There are winners and losers. And I didn't work my ass off for 12 years to lose to some scholarship girl who thinks reading books makes her better than me." There it was, the real source of his hostility, laid bare in a moment of honest rage. Jackson wasn't just a bully. He was a terrified kid, watching his worldview crumble under the weight of changing realities. But that didn't make his behavior any less destructive. "Your scholarship status doesn't give you the right to diminish other students," Zara said firmly, My scholarship status gives me the right to do whatever the hell I want, Jackson shot back. Ask Coach Brennan. Ask Principal Caldwell. Ask anyone who matters. This school needs me a hell of a lot more than it needs some wannabe teacher who doesn't understand how things work around here. He grabbed his backpack and headed for the door, pausing just long enough to deliver one final shot. Stay in your lane, Miss Blackwell, for your own good. As the door slammed behind him, Zara stood alone in her classroom, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the black bracelet again. Master Kim's voice echoed in her memory. Words from a training session years ago, when she'd been frustrated by a particularly arrogant sparring partner. Sometimes, my dear student, the most dangerous opponents are the ones who believe their own invincibility. They have blind spots you can drive trucks through. Zara walked to her desk and pulled out a legal pad, starting a careful documentation of the day's events. Time, date, witnesses present. Exact quotes she could remember. If Jackson thought his athletic status made him untouchable, he was about to learn that some people had been preparing for battles their entire lives. She'd walked away from professional fighting to become a teacher. But that didn't mean she'd forgotten how to fight. It just meant she'd learned to fight smarter. The lunch bell rang, and Zara made her way to the faculty lounge, hoping to grab a quick meal before her afternoon classes. The conversations stopped when she entered, teachers looking up from their sandwiches with the kind of curiosity that meant word had already traveled. "How'd it go with the golden boy?" asked Mrs. Patterson, a veteran history teacher who'd been at Lincoln for 15 years. "About as expected," Zara replied carefully, pulling her lunch from the refrigerator. "Jackson Blackwood's been untouchable since middle school," Patterson continued, lowering her voice. "Athletic director made it clear that football players get special consideration. Academic discipline interferes with training schedules." "What about non-academic discipline?" Patterson's laugh was bitter. "Honey, there is no non-academic discipline for that boy. Last year, 3 teachers filed complaints about his behavior. Know what happened? 2 of them got reassigned to less desirable class schedules, and 1 decided not to renew her contract." The information hit Zara like a punch to the gut. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. This school's budget depends on athletic success, and athletic success depends on keeping key players happy. You mess with that equation, you become the problem." Before Zara could respond, the lounge door opened, and Dorian Hayes shuffled in, pushing a custodial cart. The 60-year-old janitor had been at Lincoln longer than anyone, a quiet presence who seemed to see everything while saying nothing. "Afternoon, ladies," he said politely, beginning to empty wastebaskets. "Dorian," Patterson acknowledged before turning back to Zara. "Take my advice. Document everything, but don't expect miracles. Some fights aren't worth fighting." As Patterson left, Zara found herself alone with Dorian. The older man worked silently for a moment before speaking. "That young man who was giving you trouble," he said without looking up. "He's not the first one to think his jersey makes him bulletproof. I imagine you've seen a lot over the years." Dorian's eyes met hers, and she saw something unexpected there. Recognition, maybe, or warning. "I've seen enough to know that sometimes the system protects the wrong people," he said quietly. "And sometimes it takes an outsider to remind everyone what's right." He finished his work and headed for the door, pausing just long enough to add, "Building's got a lot of security cameras these days. Amazing what they pick up when someone knows where to look." Then he was gone, leaving Zara to wonder if she'd just been offered an ally or given a cryptic warning. The afternoon brought her advanced placement students, a blessed relief from the morning's drama. These were the kids who actually wanted to be there, who engaged with the material and challenged each other intellectually. Luna was among them, her earlier humiliation temporarily forgotten in the safety of academic discourse. But as Zara watched her students discuss Toni Morrison's Beloved, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was seeing only the surface of something much deeper. Luna's analysis was brilliant, but there was an edge to it now. A harder understanding of how power and privilege operated in the real world. If this reminds you of someone in your own life, someone whose voice was silenced not by violence, but by casual cruelty, then you understand why what happened next changed everything. After school, Zara stayed late to grade papers, hoping to catch up on work and maybe spot patterns in her students' writing that might give her insight into their lives. The building grew quiet around her, the usual chaos of teenage energy replaced by the peaceful hum of after-hours maintenance. She was deep in a particularly thoughtful essay about social justice when her classroom door opened without a knock. Jackson Blackwood stood in the doorway, but this time he wasn't alone. Mason and Tyler flanked him, along with two other football players she didn't recognize. All of them still wore their practice gear. The scent of sweat and artificial turf filling her small classroom. "Miss Blackwell," Jackson said, his voice carrying a false politeness that made her skin crawl. "Thought we should finish our conversation from earlier." Zara carefully set down her pen, her hand brushing against the black bracelet as she assessed the situation. 5 teenage boys, all physically larger than her, blocking her only exit route. Her injured shoulder throbbed in warning. "Gentlemen," she said evenly, "visiting hours are over. I suggest you head home." "See, that's the problem," Jackson continued, stepping into the room while his companions spread out behind him. "You keep acting like you're in charge here, like you get to tell us what to do." Tyler kicked a desk chair, sending it rolling across the floor with a loud crash. "Maybe she needs a reality check." Zara stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. 15 years of training had taught her to read violence before it erupted, and every instinct she possessed was screaming warnings now. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. Mason laughed. "The only mistake around here is thinking some college girl could come into our house and change our rules." "Your house," Zara repeated, genuine curiosity overriding her caution. "Is that really how you see this school?" "That's how it is," Jackson replied. "Has been since before you got here. Will be long after you're gone. Some people matter here, and some people don't. You're about to find out which category you're in." One of the players she didn't recognize started moving toward her desk, his intention unclear but unmistakably hostile. And that's when Zara made a decision that would change everything. Her hand found the black bracelet one more time, and Master Kim's voice echoed in her memory. "When peaceful solutions are exhausted, when retreat is impossible, when protecting others requires action, then and only then do we remember that we are warriors first." "Stop," she said, her voice dropping to a register that none of them had heard before. Something in her tone made all 5 boys pause. For just a moment, the predatory energy in the room shifted, and they found themselves looking at their young teacher with new eyes. Because Zara Blackwell wasn't just standing there anymore. She was balanced on the balls of her feet, her weight distributed perfectly, her hands loose at her sides but ready, and in her eyes was something that had nothing to do with education degrees or literary theory. "I said stop," she repeated, and this time there was no mistaking the authority in her voice. "And I meant it." The room went dead silent. Outside, The sound of Dorian's custodial cart echoed down the empty hallway, a reminder that they weren't as alone as they thought. Jackson's confident smirk faltered as he realized that something fundamental had just changed in the dynamic. His teacher wasn't backing down, wasn't cowering, wasn't playing her assigned role in his power fantasy. Instead, she was waiting, patient as a coiled spring, ready for whatever came next. And what came next would transform Lincoln High School forever. The silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. Jackson's eyes narrowed as he tried to process this new version of his teacher, the one who stood like she owned the ground beneath her feet. "You think you're scary now, he said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier swagger. "You think standing up straight changes anything?" Tyler took another step forward, emboldened by Jackson's words. "Maybe we should show her how things really work around here." That's when Zara smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression any of them had ever seen on a teacher's face. "Tyler," she said conversationally, "you're about 6 inches too close to my personal space. I'm going to give you exactly 3 seconds to step back." "Or what?" Mason challenged from behind Jackson. "Or you'll find out why I spent 15 years learning how to put people on the ground." The words hung in the air like a revelation. For the first time since they'd entered her classroom, the 5 boys looked genuinely uncertain. This wasn't the script they'd rehearsed, wasn't the easy intimidation they'd expected. Tyler, either braver or stupider than his friends, took one more step forward and reached for Zara's desk, maybe planning to sweep her papers to the floor, maybe just testing to see if she'd actually do anything. He never got the chance to find out. Zara moved like water, flowing around Tyler's outstretched arm and redirecting his momentum in a way that sent him stumbling into the wall. It happened so fast that the other boys barely registered the movement before Tyler was sitting on the floor, looking dazed and confused. "What the hell?" Mason shouted. "That," Zara said calmly, returning to her original position, "was your first and only warning. The next person who moves toward me with hostile intent will get a more comprehensive demonstration." Jackson's face had gone pale, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "You just assaulted a student." "I redirected an aggressive action using minimal force," Zara corrected. "There's a difference, and 5 witnesses who can testify that Tyler moved first." "Nobody's going to believe you over us," one of the unnamed players said. "Really?" Zara pulled out her phone and held it up, the screen clearly showing a recording in progress. "Because I've been documenting this entire encounter. Amazing how different things look when there's actual evidence." The boys exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't going according to plan, and they all knew it. "Here's what's going to happen," Zara continued, her voice steady and controlled. "You're going to leave my classroom. You're going to think very carefully about the choices you've made today. And you're going to remember that actions have consequences, even for football players." Jackson's jaw worked silently for a moment before he finally spoke. "This isn't over." "No," Zara agreed. "It's not. But the next time we talk, it's going to be in Principal Caldwell's office with your parents present." As the boys filed out, Tyler nursing a bruised ego and Mason muttering threats under his breath, Zara finally allowed herself to sit down. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. It had been 2 years since she'd used her training in any real capacity, and part of her had wondered if the skills would still be there when she needed them. They were. But as she watched Jackson's retreating form, Zara knew this was only the beginning. Boys like that didn't take humiliation well, especially public humiliation. They would be back, and next time they'd be smarter about it. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Impressive, but be careful. Some fights are bigger than you think. D. Dorian. Somehow. The custodian had witnessed what happened, and his cryptic warning suggested he knew more about Lincoln High's power structure than anyone realized. The next morning brought an email from Principal Caldwell requesting an immediate meeting. Zara wasn't surprised. She'd been expecting retaliation. What she hadn't expected was to find Luna Vasquez sitting in the principal's office, her face streaked with tears and her normally pristine appearance disheveled. "Miss Blackwell," Dr. Caldwell said, his voice heavy with exhaustion, "we need to discuss yesterday's incident." "Which incident?" Zara asked, though she suspected she knew. "Luna was found in the girls' bathroom this morning with a bottle of her mother's sleeping pills. She's physically fine, but emotionally—" He trailed off, gesturing helplessly. Zara's heart dropped into her stomach. "What happened?" Luna looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "They made a video," she whispered. "Someone filmed me crying after class yesterday and edited it with audio from a telenovela, making it look like I was being overly dramatic. It went viral in our school overnight. 23,000 views and counting," Dr. Caldwell added grimly, posted on multiple social media platforms with Luna's full name and commentary about her victim complex. Zara felt a familiar fire building in her chest. "Have you identified who posted it?" "The account was anonymous, but we're investigating." "No, you're not," Luna said quietly. "Because you already know who did it, and you're not going to do anything about it." Dr. Caldwell's face flushed. "That's not true, Luna. We take these matters very seriously. Like you took it seriously when Marcus Thompson transferred schools last year, or when Sarah Chen switched to homeschooling, or when 3 other honor students mysteriously decided Lincoln wasn't the right fit for them." The principal had no answer for that, and his silence spoke volumes. Zara leaned forward in her chair. "Dr. Caldwell, I need to report a separate incident from yesterday evening. 5 students, led by Jackson Blackwood, came to my classroom after hours and engaged in what I can only describe as coordinated intimidation." "Did you file a police report?" "Not yet. I wanted to address it through school channels first, but given Luna's situation, I'm beginning to think this is part of a larger pattern." Dr. Caldwell rubbed his temples like a man fighting a losing battle. "Miss Blackwell, I understand your concerns, but you have to understand my position. The school board has made it very clear that our athletic programs are essential to our funding. We can't just—" "Can't just what?" Zara interrupted. "Protect your students. Enforce your own anti-bullying policies. Do your job." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple," Luna said, her voice stronger now. "You're choosing football over students' lives, and I'm not the first one to figure that out." She stood up abruptly, shouldering her backpack with jerky movements. "I'm transferring to Riverside High. My parents are meeting with their administration this afternoon." "Luna, wait!" Dr. Caldwell called, but she was already gone. Zara sat in the sudden silence, processing what she'd just learned. This wasn't about one racist quarterback with anger management issues. This was about a systematic pattern of protecting athletic interests at the expense of academic students. A pattern that had been going on for years. "How many?" she asked quietly. "How many what?" "How many students have left because of this? How many bright, talented kids have been driven out because they threatened someone's sense of superiority?" Dr. Caldwell wouldn't meet her eyes. "I can't discuss individual student records." Then I'll find out another way. Zara left the principal's office with a new sense of purpose. If the school administration wouldn't protect its students, then someone else would have to step up. And she knew exactly where to start. Dorian Hayes was cleaning windows in the main hallway when she found him, moving with the methodical precision of someone who'd been doing the same job for decades. He looked up when she approached, unsurprised to see her. "Heard about the Vasquez girl," he said without preamble. "Shame. She's got more brains in her little finger than half the administration combined." "Dorian, yesterday you mentioned security cameras. How much do they actually capture?" The older man glanced around, checking for eavesdroppers before answering. "More than people think, less than people need. Funny how footage gets corrupted when it might embarrass certain programs. But you keep copies." It wasn't a question, and Dorian's slight smile confirmed her suspicion. 23 years in the Marines teaches you to document everything," he said. "Never know when the truth might be important." "I need your help." "Figured you might. Question is, you ready for what you're going to find? Because once you start pulling this thread, the whole sweater's going to unravel." Zara thought about Luna's tear-streaked face, about the other students who'd been driven away, about her own confrontation with 5 boys who believed their athletic status made them untouchable. "I'm ready." That afternoon, Dorian led her to a storage room in the building's basement, a cramped space filled with cleaning supplies and forgotten furniture. Hidden behind a stack of broken desks was a computer system that looked significantly more sophisticated than anything the school district would have approved. "Started this about 5 years ago," Dorian explained, "powering up the system. When I realized certain incidents kept disappearing from official records. Amazing what you can piece together when you actually pay attention." The files he showed her were damning. Video evidence of systematic harassment, documented patterns of preferential treatment, email chains between coaches and administrators discussing which complaints to ignore. It was a comprehensive record of institutional corruption that went far beyond simple bullying. "Jesus," Zara whispered, scrolling through folder after folder of evidence. "How is this not public knowledge? Because the people with the power to make it public are the same ones benefiting from keeping it quiet. School boards full of former athletes. Major donors all have kids in the program. And the state championship money keeps everyone happy. Everyone except the students being driven out. Everyone except them." Zara studied the screen, her mind racing through possibilities. "Can you make copies of this?" "Already done. Question is, what are you planning to do with it?" "Everything I have to." The next week passed in a blur of careful planning and strategic preparation. Zara reached out to former students who'd transferred, documenting their experiences and building a comprehensive picture of the school's toxic culture. She contacted education lawyers, civil rights organizations, and investigative journalists. Most importantly, she began connecting with other parents and community members who'd noticed the pattern but felt powerless to challenge it alone. The breakthrough came when Luna's mother, Maria Vasquez, agreed to go public with her daughter's story. As a nurse practitioner and respected community member, her voice carried weight that a single teacher's complaints might not. "My daughter is brilliant," Maria said during a recorded interview that would later air on local news. "She speaks 3 languages, maintains a 4.0 GPA, and dreams of becoming a doctor. But this school has systematically tried to make her feel worthless because her academic success threatens their athletic hierarchy." The story snowballed from there. Local media picked up the investigation. State education officials launched an inquiry, And suddenly, Lincoln High School found itself under a microscope it had never faced before. Jackson Blackwood was suspended pending the investigation, along with the other boys who'd confronted Zara. Coach Brennan was placed on administrative leave. Dr. Caldwell resigned rather than face a formal review. But the real victory came when Luna Vasquez decided not to transfer after all. "I realized something," she told Zara during a quiet moment after school. "Running away doesn't solve the problem. It just lets them win by default." "You don't owe anyone your suffering," Zara replied. "Sometimes the brave choice is leaving a toxic situation. And sometimes the brave choice is staying to fix it." 3 months later, Lincoln High School looked very different. The new principal, Dr. Sarah Martinez, had implemented comprehensive anti-bullying policies with real enforcement mechanisms. A student advocacy program gave victims a voice in disciplinary proceedings. Most importantly, the culture had begun to shift away from athletic supremacy toward genuine academic excellence. Zara stood in her classroom, touching the black bracelet that no longer felt like a reminder of what she'd lost. Instead, it had become a symbol of what she'd found, a bridge between the warrior she'd been and the teacher she was becoming. Master Kim had been right. As always, everything happened for a reason, even when you couldn't see it at the time. Her shoulders still ached sometimes, especially when storms were coming. But watching Luna lead a discussion on social justice literature, seeing former outcasts find their voices, witnessing a community choose courage over comfort, Zara knew she was exactly where she belonged. The bell rang, students filed out, and another day of teaching ended. But the real education, the kind that happened when people decided to stand up for what was right, was just beginning. In the hallway, Dorian Hayes nodded to her as he passed with his custodial cart, and she could swear she saw him smile. Sometimes the most important battles are fought not with fists, but with documentation, determination, and the simple refusal to let injustice win by default. And sometimes, the strongest weapon a teacher can carry isn't found in any martial arts manual. It's the absolute certainty that every student deserves to feel safe, valued, and heard, even when the system says otherwise. 6 months after the investigation concluded, Zara received a letter that would stay with her forever. It was handwritten on cream-colored paper, the kind reserved for important occasions. "Dear Miss Blackwell, my name is David Chen, Sarah Chen's older brother. You probably don't remember Sarah, but she was a student at Lincoln 3 years ago before she switched to homeschooling. She was brilliant in mathematics, dreamed of becoming an engineer, but couldn't handle the daily harassment anymore. Sarah saw the news coverage about what you did. She's applying to MIT now, and in her admission essay, she wrote about a teacher she never had, but wished she could have met, someone who proved that adults can choose to protect students instead of systems. She wanted me to tell you that your courage gave her the strength to try again. She's not hiding anymore. Thank you for fighting a battle that should have been fought years ago. Sincerely." David Chen Zara folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer, next to similar notes from former students she'd never taught, but somehow helped anyway. That afternoon, as she watched Luna confidently present her college scholarship acceptance letter to the class, Zara touched her bracelet one final time. Master Kim had always said that the greatest victories weren't won in competition rings, but in moments when strength served something larger than itself. She'd finally understood what he meant. Some fights are worth everything you have to give. And some teachers discover that their most important lesson was never about literature at all. It was about refusing to let anyone's light be dimmed by someone else's insecurity. In a world that often rewards silence over speaking up, choosing courage over comfort, and justice over convenience, requires the kind of strength that can't be taught in any classroom. It can only be lived.